Hi, welcome to this review of my BTC 5100C keyboard. I bought this keyboard after being quite disappointed with most MX style switches and really enjoying my NIS plum board, which, being a Topper clone, is essentially a fancy rubber dome board. I got this keyboard as new old stock of eBay and, as you can see from the manual, it was made in 1997. It uses a 5-pin DIN plug and uses the AT protocol. As such, it's easy to get working with modern PCs using a passive DIN adapter, DIN to PS2 adapter, which I have here. To get it working over USB, you'd need an active adapter though. USB doesn't really know what to make of an AT protocol. Speaking of the connector, there are two revisions of this board. This is the first revision, which I have here, which uses the 5-pin DIN plug. There's also a PS2 version, which is widely considered to be the inferior version of this board. I don't exactly know what it is, and from what I've seen, people can't really seem to agree on it online. But from watching videos, it does sound a lot different. And from people who have used both, the PS2 version seems to maybe have tighter tolerances around the barrel plate, making the sliders a bit more scratchy, or anyway, can't comment on that any further. But there is a definite difference in sound. Alright, onto the switches. This is still a rubber dome board, but it works slightly different from your standard HP or Dell office keyboard. It uses MX mount keycaps, but a quick look at the layout reveals that sourcing keycaps for this board will be quite a pain. Replacing any of the modifier caps, apart from tab and caps lock, will be an exercise in frustration, not to mention the tiny top row. Speaking of, the top row uses a different slider and a different mount. This isn't MX compatible, and the only thing that's sort of compatible is Mitsumi mount. I mean, you can force it to work on a KPQ board. Let me show you. Here, this is a Mitsumi KPQ board, and if you really want to, you can sort of make it work, but it's not really pretty. Doesn't feel that great either. Alright, with the board taken apart, let's have a look at the sensing mechanism. In essence, it's a slider in the barrel plate. It goes over a rubber dome sheet. These rubber domes have a conductive pad on the bottom, and when pressed on its corresponding position on the PCB, it bridges these intertwining contacts, closing the circuit, registering the key press. The advantage of using this system compared to just regular rubber domes, just two membrane sheets separated by the middle layer and pushed together when a key is struck, is that the bottom out feeling is a lot more firm in this. You see, the only thing that really dampens the downstroke is the rubber on the mat hitting the legs of the slider. Let's have a closer look at the layout. This is a 90s space-saving keyboard, so a bit of funkiness is expected. Let's start at the bottom left of the keyboard. As you can see, control isn't in its usual place. It's been shifted one unit to the right. And instead there's a function key. I think BTC didn't have its priorities straight when designing this layout. As this board was introduced in 1992, I wasn't expecting Windows keys, of course, but shifting control to the right seems unintuitive. In day-to-day use, whether you're doing office work, playing games, for me at least, control always takes priority over the function layer. And seeing as most boards of the time just had an empty space where the Windows keys now reside on modern boards, I can't really wrap my head around this key placement. Yeah, I know this was quite a tangent, but this is my #1 complaint about the layout. On to my second complaint. See these arrow keys? I know doing an inverse T-nav isn't possible without complicating the layout even further, but it just takes some getting used to. It's not too bad. Apart from these two niggles, I quite like the layout. It presents a very good key to size ratio. It's about as wide as a modern 60% board, but has way more keys. Quick note on the build quality. It's not the best. There is zero metal in this board, but the plastics are decently thick, and because this isn't a big board, it doesn't really flex all that much. The board weighs around 535-6 grams without a cable, and with it table slapped on top. It's a little over 600 grams. Pretty light, but for such a small keyboard it's okay. Quick note on the stabilizers. The only actual stabilizer on this board, you know, or wire stabilizers as we come to know them, is underneath the spacebar. The shift uses this, you know, this rod stabilizers on both sides, and it's not the best. I mean, this is and was a cheap keyboard, but it doesn't really feel great. You can see it rocking side to side quite a bit. I haven't actually missed a key press using it, but it doesn't feel that great. Alright, enough technicalities. How does it feel? Well, first off, it's extremely tactile. More tactile than any other rubber dome board I've ever used. And honestly, it might be a bit much for me. As stated at the start of this video, I use a NIS as my daily keyboard, which uses 45 gram domes that are way less tactile than even your standard Dell or HP board. For me, this results in a very relaxed typing feel. It's like your fingers are going down a nice slide. Being capacitive, the NIS also actuates halfway. Bottoming out isn't even necessary. This also contributes to the relaxed typing feel. You can sort of just float your fingers around the keyboard and somehow sentences are constructed. It's completely impossible not to bottom out when typing on this BTC due to the aforementioned tactility. This is for a reason, of course. You need to bottom out for a key press to register. The travel also seems a bit shorter than usual. This gives us a near claustrophobic typing feel. You almost feel digital, you know, that they're either up or down. A little off topic here, but I still wanted to address this. It seems that especially these days, people in the keyboard community seem to agree that more tactility equals a better switch. I think that's not a great way to go about it. Isn't one of the reasons we moved away from rubber dome over membrane the tactility it requires? Typing on this BTC, Box Royals and Toper boards with BKE domes, the tactility is really distracting. It feels like fighting an uphill battle before falling off a cliff. I'd even go so far as to say that I'd rather type on a Cherry MX Brown board than some of the extremely tactile MX clones. I can't wait to move beyond MX tab tactility, so I'm pretty stoked to see how Zeal's Alps-like click leaf in an MX housing turns out. Anyway, rant over, back to the BTC. Right, very tactile. What about weighting? I don't have any numbers on this, but from feel alone I guess this is probably in the 70-ish grams of force at the tactile event. This is just too stiff for me, and I'd say even for most people this will tire out their hands very quickly. Typing on MX Black suddenly feels like typing on a cloud that still has some resistance, but still, it's also quite rattly and it feels imprecise, and the tactility sort of gets lost in translation, so to speak. So, conclusion time then. Given that this is and always has been a cheap keyboard that can nowadays be picked up brand new as new old stock for around $40, it might be worth it. But you'd have to both overlook some things and love the typing feel. Anyway, let's start with the positives. The form factor is pretty sensible space saving wise, but the decision to move control unit to the right can be annoying. Finding keys for anything other than the alpha and numeric keys is nearly impossible. The domes are nice and snappy, have a strong, rounded tactile bump, but the shorter travel and stiffness of the domes makes it so you really have to hammer the keys. The keyboard uses the AT protocol, so it will work using a passive adapter over PS2, but it will need an active adapter to work over USB. I'd say this keyboard will have a pretty narrow use case for people. First off, it either needs to be the only keyboard you use, or you will need to constantly adapt to the differing layout. For example, if you use this board at home, you use a different, standard layout. Keyboard at your office, you'll need to keep switching. You might accidentally hit the Windows key when you're meaning to hit the Control key, or vice versa. Secondly, you really need to like the amount of tactility. I just don't really see a use case for it, especially when cheap mechanical keyboards from China can be had for cheaper. Take this AJAS AK33 for example. I got this for 25 euros shipped. I can swap out keycaps, solder in new switches, which I did. This board came with blacks and I soldered in these okay blue switches. All in all, it's not the worst keyboard out there. It's mostly that I was disappointed. I've seen this board being compared favorably to Topra, so I was immediately excited. It's not the worst board out there. If you find this at a thrift store for pennies on the dollar, take it home and see if you like it. Thanks for watching, and here's a typing demonstration.